Hello everyone, and welcome to our discussion today on the value of EdTech in a post-COVID-19 world. So my name is Mark Frost and I work for Intel's Internet of Things group, specifically focusing on visual collaboration technology. And today I'm delighted to have four panelists for our discussion from the world of education. So before we begin, I'll just ask everyone to briefly introduce themselves, starting with Jonathan.
Hi, afternoon everyone. My name is Jonathan Bracken-Rowe, former CTO of Kramer Electronics, and my main focus was working with the factory on the Kramer VIA range of collaborative products.
Thanks, Jonathan. And Sue.
Hi, I'm Sue Atwell. I'm head of EdTech at GISC. I work in our R&D department, working with innovation and EdTech startups and looking for products in the kind of post-3-year development.
Thank you, Sue. And Duncan.
Hi, yes, I'm Duncan Peabody. I'm currently an independent consultant on digital learning spaces. I've been involved with collaborative technologies into higher education since 2006, and for the last 5 years, I pretty much know all these people here today because of the roadshows that we've been running, which for the last 2 years has been a full GISP project. I published a couple of books, which Tom's contributed to on learning spaces, and currently looking at opportunities for where EdTech can better support remote and hybrid learning, and especially with the persistence of information where you've got multiple screens, even accessed remotely.
Thank you, Duncan. And then finally, Tom.
Hi, I'm Tom Duff, and I'm the Associate Director of Learning and Teaching of the Learning and Teaching Academy at City of Glasgow College. My main role is to basically develop online learning for 19,000 students as of the 17th of September. So no mean task. I've worked with Duncan in the past regarding Sticky Campus. In fact, it was UWS that did for the first developments of learning spaces for me, which we presented in London and all over the place, in Germany and Berlin, etc. So welcome, guys.
Amazing, thank you all. So people watching, we do have a facility for answering your questions. So you should see on the screen like a little live Q&A chat box. So any questions you have, please do fill it in, and the team here will do their best to answer as we go along. Okay, so jumping first into our questions. So given that COVID-19 has accelerated the move to online learning, can we turn this into an opportunity to transform digital learning, or will we end up making do and mending? To Sue first.
Okay, well, crises shape history, and this is our chance really to reshape education in a way that works for all students. We live digitally, and yet the campus really remains largely physical, with the add-on of a virtual learning environment not always that well used. We need transformation rather than translation. Why can't students learn in the way that suits them? Why can't they learn differently, maybe totally online and flexible to fit around their existing commitments? Or accelerated face-to-face, complete the degree in 18 months. Or a mixture of the two. Do some online learning and do some paid work placements, employer projects, and get the competencies and skills that employers are looking for and move more swiftly into employment. Our recent digital learning report identifies 3 things that are needed for 2030. Learning should be intentional, delivering a learning experience that's built from the ground up. It needs to be seamless, struggling with the words, seamless, so reliable, coherent and integrated. Students expect full-on commercial experience like we get with the rest of our lives. You know, we want a nice, shiny, interactive thing that works and supportive, so designed to meet every student and educator's needs and help them.
Okay, thanks, Sue. And Tom, what are you planning to do for your students?
Well, as Duncan mentioned earlier, it's a hybrid learning. Basically, the majority of our students will be taught theory online through a blended learning approach using a VLE. We have undertaken a comprehensive set of webinars using a range of products such as Zoom, such as Loom, using Kahoot to interact with the classroom. What we're trying to get staff to do, and that's part of my major role. So this is a major opportunity for City of Glasgow and for the education sector, and that is to change the culture and to promote digital literacy, proper learning in the classroom and proper learning online. What we need to do for staff is to teach them how to change the basis of an hour's teaching. It's no longer Zoom lectures, it's no longer PowerPoints, it's no longer VLE repositories. It's very much about chunking up learning and doing 10 minutes activities, 10 minutes individual, group work, collaborative work, and basically making students active learners as opposed to passive learners that they've been for many, many years.
And have you tried any of that? Oh, sorry, I was just going to say, Tom, have you tried any of that? Is this a fairly new thing for you guys, or is this something you've been doing over a period of time?
Oh, I've been pushing this for 25 years. I'm a visual learner, and I failed at school because I couldn't learn the way they wanted to teach me. And only now have we reached a crescendo in the latter parts of my career where I can finally say this is true learning for students. It's learning for life. It's not basically what to learn, it is how to learn. It's not about us joining the dots for them. It's about them joining the dots for themselves and becoming lifelong learners. And this is a fantastic opportunity. And I just hope people grasp the thistle in a Scottish way.
It really is, isn't it? That's the whole thing. It's not about moving what we had online. It's about changing it and doing it differently and making it work for the students and supporting the staff.
Fit for purpose.
Well, I was just going to say, in there that it's not EdTech really. EdTech has to enable it to happen, especially if we're going to join these people up remotely. But it's what Tom mentioned exactly. It's changing the culture. If we look at the corporate world, we've just seen everybody. We can all quite happily exist from home, not because technology suddenly ramped up. That technology for people connecting. Those telepresence rooms that cost hundreds of thousands of pounds have been around for 15, 20 years. It's not the technology that's suddenly come of the day, it's the culture that's changed, and the technology was already there. And the problem in higher education is the technology is there, but people haven't been taught how to use it to engage their students. And that's the real challenge. So EdTech absolutely has to enable it, but it's not what's going to make it happen. It's going to be that change of culture. It's having, Sue was absolutely right when she said, this crisis is the time for fresh thinking. And, I think all of us think that means it's a digital first leadership. Do things digitally, but also make sure they're fit for purpose and the cultural changes there.
How do you think the group and the collaborative working will take place? We've obviously seen it with the roadshow in the classroom environment with groups of 5 and 6 students working together, but obviously we're moving away from that. That's possibly not going to be safe in the short term with the COVID situation, and particularly say for Tom, how do you feel that how are you going to do that at Glasgow? Because again, you've obviously seen the roadshow in action, Tom.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting because I had a discussion this morning with my vice principal about this, and we've got one of the most stunning state-of-the-art buildings, 2 of them, one in the Riverside in Glasgow and one in the centre of Glasgow next to Sackley University. £250 million campus. Duncan has seen it. I'm sure other people.
It is beautiful, yeah.
It's universities would kill to have this building, but USP has now disappeared.
Yeah,
because the beautiful building might as well become a hotel. So we have to turn that online campus and make it live. How do we do that? Well, I think we do it in 3 ways. It's about innovative pedagogy. It's about trying to change how we teach. It's trying to change how we assess. I remember many, many years ago going to a conference down south, interactive learning conference, and they said, do you know something? There are 240 different ways to teach and assess students. We use 3 of them. So it's innovative pedagogy and innovative learning, interactive learning, giving the students independence, giving them resilience instead of what we give them just now, which is passivity and ability to be reliant and us having to do everything for them. Secondly, it's about appropriate technology, as Duncan says. It's not about EdTech. It's about technology that works. I support 500 pieces of software. I only need 15 pieces of software. And finally, it's about learning spaces. It's about learning spaces face-to-face. And our building will change. So instead of having 6 top tech or learning tables in our rooms like Sticky Campus, we'll have 4 or 3. And it's about face-to-face. It's about online. It's about blended. It's about hybrid. It's at distance. and it's basically fit for purpose learning. It's about data analytics at the back end, supporting students with mental health, with digital poverty. It's a whole range of things that we have to now look towards, not the fancy building.
And I think hopefully it's more about enabling students to have a more personalised learning journey. You know, that's what we should be moving towards, that students are able to choose the way that learns and learn when it suits them and at their own pace. You know, some of us move quite quickly through learning, other of us want to go, you know, revisit areas. So we should support all of our students.
Definitely.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that people always used to say, or sometimes try and promote their roadshow when they were hosting it, was saying, "Come along, this is the classroom of the future." And that always used to irk me, because actually it can't be the classroom of the future if we've actually got it on campus today. What really it is about joining up those remote students, so making all those separate locations one big classroom. You know, with
Exactly.
not with 300 students, but maybe with 20, 24 students. Give them a sense of belonging, so that all those remote seats become one classroom. And that's the challenge for not just EdTech, but the pedagogy and the engagement and the tools that you're going to choose to do that with.
That sense of belonging is really important for mental health and well-being.
Yes. And digital poverty. That's a big, 25% of students don't have access to broadband. That's a big issue. And the tech companies have to step up and say, for example, NHS workers were provided free data from Vodafone during the COVID crisis. That sort of thinking for students has to be there, and they'll get benefits at the other end from that, from students being supported.
Is your college able to support students like that, Tom, or is that something you're looking for the tech companies to do, as you said?
Well, we're in discussion with Scottish Government in this. We've just bought 3,000 laptops to rent out to students. Other colleges are not going that way, but we've decided we have to support our students. There's 3 levels of laptop: the basic level for Word, the secondary level for some applications, and the high level for games development. So we are very much investing in our students, but at the same time, we're trying to develop digital skills through Universities for Industry, to develop perhaps a YouTube channel that can actually deliver how do you cook, how do you create construction projects, things that are traditionally face-to-face. We're trying to turn them around and teach them online and saying, if you need to build a brick wall, this is how you do it. And yes, you will eventually come into the college and do it face-to-face, but this is how you can teach. So we're developing NMIS projects for construction industry. All sorts of different areas have opened up because of this supposed crisis. It's an opportunity, first and foremost, I think.
Would you have that content already ready?
We're still trying to get it ready. We've got NMIS stuff is ready already, and you can look that up. The construction innovation bodies are all there. We're working with UFI to get a channel ready for Skills for Work, because the Scottish Government reckon we will have to train up to 1 million people in the next 18 months who have been unemployed or de-skilled.
Okay.
So we have to develop a very comprehensive training programme,
So that's retraining as well as new trainees.
It's basically people who are looking at people who have been chucked out of work, and it's an opportunity for them, you know, to say, if you get this digital certificate in XYZ, then it will give you a chance when you go for the 1,000 jobs that are out there, you know.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. So Duncan, given that COVID-19 has created the circumstances for video conferencing to finally become the next big thing, as we are seeing today, you know, how does this technology need to develop to fulfill academic and non-academic needs, especially around kind of remote learning? Because I don't think it's really fit for purpose today.
No, I think there's a whole number of strands to it. You know, as I mentioned, it was the cultural aspect that's happened within the business world that's brought it a long way forward. So the cultural aspects within the student population is that, you know, everybody's got a mobile phone. So, you know, there's got to be a lot of development down the mobile route. Everybody's got a mobile. Maybe the next year, instead of having selfie sticks, maybe the next development is going to be a stick, something that holds the phone, so you can have a better experience rather than holding it in your hand and doing that. Just something simple like that. But, you know, so it's going to be app driven, that connectivity, that push a button and it connects to all your 4 people. You haven't got to do those things, you know. And some, you know, and maybe somebody like, I mean, Teams, I know on the mobile is a pretty good experience. Blackboard Collaborate is a great experience on the mobile, you know. So, but that hasn't hit mass market yet. It's popular, but not mass market. So I think a lot of it's got to be down the video route for one, and then it's that sense of it's a sense of belonging and group work that needs to come into it more. And I think one of the challenges that is, where does that doing more with video have a line with things like GDPR, which I've seen people say, oh, I could develop that, but it's GDPR that stops me doing it. And I sometimes think, sometimes, maybe it's not the video things, maybe it's having to step back and look at all those other things that are involved. Again, the cultural things, the legal things, to say, well, there's been a lot of work done with wellbeing, which we might discuss a little bit later. And I know there could be more connectivity, except, well, you can't do that unless you've got the bind and the sign and the signature. And sometimes students don't want to do that, There's that, there's often a feeling it's a little bit creepy sometimes. So we got over that. And also, what are we doing? Are we just, at the moment, we're doing a face-to-face, we're recording it. But as far as I know, we're not checking how attentive or how engaged we are. There's a worry that we'll start to do that with students. And also faculty will say, hang on a minute, are you going to use that to judge me and to rate my performance and my ability? And if that's the case, I'm not very happy about that. So it's not technology again, it's cultural, and it's using the technology in the right way.
Yeah, we did that when we developed learning analytics. We spent the first year of that project developing an ethical code of practice, because that was the key thing to do first. And we did that in conjunction with students and practitioners and, lots of people. But it had to be done first. Just because you can doesn't mean you should.
No, and I'm aware of, I won't mention, but I'm aware of an English university that spent an absolute fortune on lecture capture, put it in a lot of their rooms, all the big lecture spaces, and it sat dormant for 4 years because they took them 4 years to actually get everybody to sign off to say we're going to use it.
Yeah.
And by which time it all needs updates and it's out of date and it doesn't work with the latest, so you can imagine all those problems. But somebody thought, oh, it'd be great. And they did it for the right reasons. Students love it. Students love to have access to it. But it was actually wasn't the students blocking it. It was the culture that blocked it.
Yeah, the moral
really. And there's a day obviously we don't want the current situation to persist longer than it has to persist. But there is a danger that there's a danger from what we're talking about with EdTech, that if things go back to what we perceive as normal too quickly, then a lot of these things that could go and be real improvements will say, well, we don't need it. We don't need it now.
We mustn't let it go back. That's the challenge for us, is to make this continue to move forwards. As Tom said, he'd been here for 25 years. It can't be like that going forwards. It has to change, and we have to take some responsibility for making that change continual.
What worries me is that I see at the outset of this and the exams crisis in Scotland, the SQA exams crisis, and the Scottish Government Minister said, we'll soon have things back to normal. And Gavin Williamson said in England, we'll soon have things back to normal. And I'm saying this is an opportunity to restructure the whole exam. It could take them a year to restructure the whole exam system, to do away with lectures, to do away with examinations, and make it continuous assessment and learning that kids want to learn. Let kids learn by WhatsApp and Instagram and YouTube. They don't learn by sitting in front of a PowerPoint. They don't read them. I've got staff who print off 35 pages of 60 documents. Nobody ever walks out to college with them. They throw them right in the bin. So we have to get real in this and say, this is the fork in the road. Make do and mend, as Mark said at the outset, or embrace the risk and move to that new, very exciting arena, which is online, it's face-to-face, it's blended, it's hybrid, it's real life learning for kids of the 21st century. Let's shed some of the dross that we put in the digital immigrant process. I think I'm very powerful, but it's very passionate, as you can see.
Yeah, it is real life learning. I think that's the key. It's real life learning with real skills and real competencies that play into what real employers are looking for. This is about helping people to have and be able to demonstrate. Assessment shouldn't just be about essays and multiple choice and things like that. I did some professional training not so long ago, and I had to teach myself how to think differently and how to write for 3 hours on end in order to do the exam, because we think in a way now that enables us to move things around, you know, as we think, oh, that's more important than that. And it was quite hard work. And I spent more time on doing that sometimes than some of the content where it was, you know, it all went well, I passed. But I think we should be looking at things like, you know, setting sophisticated tasks. Technology allows us to challenge students with things like that, where they can apply their knowledge to authentic tasks and demonstrate real competency rather than just regurgitate knowledge. So I've never been able to say that word properly.
But the power of what Tom's talking about in a slightly different arena, there's a music conservatoire, and I can't remember its name now, but it's on the banks of the river in Thames in Greenwich. And traditionally, they would only take students in who could play the piano or do the violin to grade 8 and could read music like a concert pianist. And they've now started to take young people in who've never had a formal music lesson. They've learned through YouTube, they've learned how to play the guitar and play the piano, and they're that good, they're the equivalent of a level 8, but they can't read music. But they're technically that good. They've started to take them in and allow them. And that's because they've learned in a way that they wouldn't have learned traditionally. They wouldn't have been able to sit at the piano and read music and do it all. But they're absolutely brilliant young people.
Yeah. I mean, a very good example of an assessment process that I saw recently was the simplest form of assessment and the most accessible assessment you could find. Students were given a task from different courses. They had to identify in their subject area a concept that they were given in Wikipedia. They had to download the information that was available in that concept. They had to research that project. They had to then update Wikipedia with research assessments, all the information required. It was the simplest and easy, and the students loved it because forevermore they're in digital print. That was their work forever. Now, there's nothing more powerful than that for a student to make them impassioned, engaged.
Okay, so Jonathan, most HE and FE teaching spaces have got a lot of technology in them. I think we've seen that. You know, during lockdown, lectures are being delivered remotely using things like Teams and Zoom. Does this mean that there should be a move away from the kind of older school, typical 5-year refresh cycle for some of these spaces?
Yeah, I think my thoughts on that is that obviously a lot of spaces, a lot of HE and FE places that I've seen with Kramer, they just replace things because they need to. I think, and it's very difficult. I would say it's very difficult for them to know what to replace them with sometimes. And I think one of the things that COVID is giving us is an opportunity to reevaluate and bringing together. I think a lot of focus has been on what's going on in the classroom. I think now what needs to happen is what happens in the classroom. Maybe it's a smaller class cohort, maybe it's 12 students, but there's another 12 or another 30 elsewhere. And so those classrooms need to be able to push out, whether it's on a lecture capture through some of the Panopto and that sort of thing, or maybe just a YouTube. I mean, it's possible there are devices out there that will simply take a collaboration session, wireless collaboration session, and then push it out over a YouTube stream. And that then gives a much greater access, which is certainly what Tom's talking about in terms of bringing together the students that can't get in or aren't able to get in, don't feel safe in getting into the lecture space, with those that have to for whatever reason. I mean, there will always be some that feel more comfortable. Particularly, we talked earlier about mental reasons. Just I mean, at our company, there's a mixture of all sorts of people, and some people wanted to go back into the office much sooner than others. They were by themselves, and I think that shouldn't be forgotten. I mean, students maybe we're thinking everyone's still at home, but that's not necessarily the case. There will be students that are by themselves in a small apartment, small flat, and they will be really benefit from being back in a slightly collaborative environment in the teaching spaces in a university, even if it's just for certain things. And yes, Tom's talked about certain things, collaborative work, group work, as also traditional lecture work pushed out. I mean, Duncan, Jisk and I, we spent a lot of time with the roadshow, and we also found that you can't push everything out. You can't do it all one way. You can't do all group working. You can't do all collaborative working. There has to be a mix of different teaching methodologies really to get the most from these students.
I think one of the issues though with HE is the fact that it's usually such a long-term planning. You know, they're planning things now for next summer, and so the things that were planned for this summer that's just gone were thought of before 9 months ago when this all started.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, and so how long is it going to last? Space is going to be used differently. I'm aware of some universities who have gone ahead this summer with what they had planned, even though they won't use it in the next 12 months. I'm aware of others that have cancelled what they were going to do. I think the financial year cut-off being 31st July would have had a bearing. Some people say, well, let's just do it because if we don't do it, the money's gone anyway. It's that sort of mentality. So, and I think we're in that. We just don't know what's going to happen at the stage at the moment. So I think I think that planned 5-year will get knocked on the head quite a bit, actually.
Yeah.
I bet Tom's going to be spending money differently in September and December than he was thinking about last January.
I hope it does get knocked on the head.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah.
It's about micro learning now. It's about chunked up learning, and it's about CPD is a big thing. So we're looking at a different market now. The international market has gone for us, so we've got a 20% gap in our funding. So we have to find 10 million of funding. So that's a big issue, and we'll do that through by niche courses, developing the CPD courses online that we can, instead of having 20 in a class, we can have 120 in a classroom. And these are people, not our traditional students who need the face-to-face and they need the support scaffolding, if you like. These are professional people sitting at their desk who have been used to online working, who are now saying, I can do a qualification through CPD, through City Glasgow College, and I can go into university in the same process through a VLE. I can do 20-minute chunk learning, I can get an assessment, I can get a discussion thread out the door, I can do a presentation on a video like this, and I get 10 marks, 20 marks, and all of a sudden I've passed and I don't look as if I've done anything but go to work. So it's a totally different horizon we're looking at here.
Interesting. Okay, thank you guys. So we've touched on this a little bit earlier, especially with the current situation and the kind of whole situation around the A-level results. Student mental health has been kind of impacted, I think. Where do we think that EdTech can really kind of help address this for some students? Maybe Duncan.
I think there's lots that we can do with EdTech. There's a lot being done out there at the moment. There are quite a lot of universities who have got apps and things for aimed that have been developed within the university. Maybe sometimes 2 or 3 universities working together. I think the one area that's lacking there is I'm not aware of anybody who's evaluated those all sort of like independently. The university developed it, put it in, seems to be working, but actually how well is it working compared to other ones? So I think there's an opportunity there to do some work there. But again, it's a lot of it I think is cultural. Lots of students, we know there's lots of students who have a need for some sort of help, and now this mental health is growing, but it's not just unique to higher education. It's obviously society wide, and technology could. I hear anecdotally of students not declaring things, going to university, their medical records haven't been seen. So maybe technology should be working there. And again, some of that's a GDPR thing. If I don't want to tell you,
yes,
and students, again, there's a lot of hearsay where students say, well, I don't want to tell you that I've got a mental health problem because I don't want that people will think of me negatively because of it
beforehand.
We're coming out of that a little bit. I think we're all getting a little bit better than that, but that certainly used to happen. So can we join people up? Can we buddy students together through technology? Should I'm trying to think when my own son was at university, should parents, if you're developing some technology and apps and things, should we be including parents in that? So if a student's got a problem, it's alerting multiple people. But at the moment, those things don't happen, not because of technology, but because of GDPR and cultural issues around it.
Yeah, certainly we see that, you know, like in China, for example, they have a very different attitude. You know, there's technology already in place to monitor the kids during the day. Those reports go home automatically to parents at the end of the day. So parents are kind of kept abreast of that kind of stuff in China. And, you know, the GDPR issues are very different there. But I think probably in the UK and Europe, I think a lot of parents will go, oh, goodness me, I don't want some video system monitoring my kids, or the students saying, I don't want a video system monitoring me, you know, throughout the day and reporting on what I may or may not have done during the day.
And yeah, I understand from various things. Sorry, so various things I've seen and read. Just right back at nursery level, nurseries have cameras in, and students can, parents can check up that their kids are safe in the nursery.
Yeah, that's very true, and that's been, certainly I'm aware of that being in place since my daughter went to nursery. Initially, it was only to check as you were leaving that they were okay in the space that you left them in. But I know other parents who are able to watch their small children in the nursery remotely and are nowhere near them. They're already in the office when the child settles down for their afternoon sleep or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think transition's a big area for this. You know, transition from school to college, college to university. Transition's a big area for mental health need, and technology can help that, even if it's just by, you know, flagging up earlier interventions and enable those to be better targeted and freeing up resources. But I think University of Manchester, I have implemented things like Big White Wall, and they did it by consulting with a panel of students across a range of different options and available solutions, and then they've implemented the one that the students considered to be the best fit and the one that they'll use, and it's been hugely successful. So by, you know, having those conversations and including the student, that's the way to make things work.
I think you're right. The Big White Wall is a big issue. I think that's important. We're putting a lot of money into student support. We've just created a brand new open Moodle, which basically, traditionally, universities only allow students access to the VLE once they register and enrol, which means they have to have an Active Directory. So we've created an open Moodle, which allows any student to go onto our site and register as a potential student or as an active student waiting to come in. And we're putting in massive resources to develop that over the next 5 years, so that you basically, there'll be an app there that says, welcome to City of Glasgow College, which course are you interested in? And we will track that person from start to finish. We've got a Google tracker that identifies how students are doing in their subjects. And if they drop in a couple of subjects, kind of 3 strikes rule, then automatically an email gets sent to student support, and a meeting, an interview is set up, and it identifies and interviews early, support students who are at risk, and they don't even know that we know they're at risk. We just see it on a big data analytics at the back end, which is big in the US. When I was there, they were doing massive things to get students from C to A's, and very successfully doing so. So it is very much about that kind of the cradle supporting them, you know.
Yeah.
And is that just an initiative your college is doing, Tom, or is that FE throughout Scotland?
It's the Google Tracker is one of my learning technologists who's come up with this idea. And of course, there's no funding for it to get it to the next level. But now, of course, because it's such a kind of a hot topic, we've now got the funding to turn it into an app. So that will hopefully be with the sector. And, you know, the people who work for me are basically into open educational resources. If at all possible, we'll give it for free. That's what we want to do. So we're looking for collaboration with UFI, UHI, other colleges, Scottish Government, Skills Development Scotland, to say, yes, let us develop it. We're very good at doing projects. We've just won a massive project with Nesta about city skills, about changing the language for students when they come in, so they can recognise it. So it can be a Newcastle accent, it can be a Scottish accent, and the app suits their particular issue in terms of language. So we are very much an open college in terms of that. So we're very much involved in open resources.
Is that an automatic process, the Google Tracker, or that's following input by lecturers and teachers of the students, what they're achieving?
Well, what we're trying to do what we're trying to do is, at the moment, it's a manual system, so that somebody has to actually type in the outcomes for each module or unit.
Okay.
But what we're trying to do is to pull the courses from the database, the student database, and that automatically fills that. All the lecturer needs to do is to log on and input their marks for a particular subject for performance outcome. And then if there's an alert, that is automatically sent back to student engagement. And finally, if they get a pass, then we automatically go back and enter that in the system, and it goes to SQA exam board. So we're trying to automate it, but it's manual at the moment.
Okay.
It's show and do, show and tell, if you like.
Yeah.
In progress.
Yes. No, it sounds like a good system that's already there, that other places should be using.
Hopefully.
So one final question then. So as technology companies, we're often guilty of creating kind of solutions looking for a problem. And there's a big push at the moment towards video and vision. And do you guys think that the routine video observation of students has a place in higher education, or is it just something somewhere we just shouldn't go? To whomever.
I suppose it's I'm going to use the C word again, the cultural world again. It depends whether we're looking at it as a force for good or a force for evil. And monitoring for monitoring's sake, or actually if we can get something positive out of it, if we can, you know, I've done a little bit of work with a company called Note Talker who create real-time notes for students, and they're trying to develop their system so there's tracking of, we're using videos to see whether you're understanding it and to be able to put in real time back to the academic. In a lecture situation, this is, of course, you know, if you've got a group of students and you can tell from the notes they're making and their facial expressions that it ain't going in, or they don't understand it, or maybe your teacher that they missed the previous module, you need to know now. So it could be a force for good, but again, I think it's that culture. It's, you know, are we you know, I think as more goes online, and we're all used to carrying the video and doing so much more video, I personally think it will come. I think as long as it's seen as that, you know, positive, it will come. You know, you're already getting people using it for assessment and a validation of who they are sat in front of the computer screen already. You know, if you're doing a remote exam, you've got to make sure it's you, you know, especially if it's something that you're going to get a certificate for and go and do something for somebody. You've got to know that you've actually passed it and got that qualification. And so
I'd take a slightly different slant on it. You know, I think it's, and especially with things like you have to use it to see that it's you taking the exam. I think, do you, or should you be thinking about different ways of doing the exam? You know, John mentioned some models. You know, that's where I think we should be going. I think we have to be so careful with this kind of thing, because it can be start as a force for good, but then things can easily be, oh, well, now we're capturing that and using it for this. Maybe we could use it for this as well, or maybe we could share it with this, or maybe we could do this. And I think it's an ethical quandary. I think it has to be, you know, really carefully thought through, and everybody has to be able to input. But I think that's the wrong challenge. Sometimes it's the wrong challenge. We just need not think, how should we do this with technology, but how can technology help us do this better? How can we just really rethink it and do it differently?
Yeah, I think that's a difficult question to overcome, the observation thing about students. We have put on a thing on our website asking students to tick a box to say you will take part in a Zoom lecture. They will do that, but I personally am not comfortable with that kind of, well, the staff are not comfortable with teacher observation, so I don't know if students will be comfortable with student observation. Where I see video and audio especially as a killer app is in feedback and giving students, I mean, as a teacher for 35 years, the subject matter is immaterial. Anybody can learn it. What you're trying to teach students is high confidence and self-esteem. And you do that by giving one-to-one or effective one-to-one feedback. And you can do that through audio. So if somebody does an exam for me, or an essay or a project, I can do general feedback to 100 students. But I can also do a 1-minute audio feedback to Tom Duff or whoever it is, Duncan Pemberby, and say, Duncan, you did that well, you didn't do this so well. And Duncan feels as if he's getting a one-to-one tutorship. The same with video feedback. That's where the strength of video and audio is. It's about support for the student. So, for example, we're talking about mental health for students. If I'm having a financial problem and I can go into a website and say, if you're having financial problems, watch this video. And it's Tom Duff or somebody in my department saying, the sort of things you might be suffering are this, this, and this. If you've got this problem, contact this person. All of a sudden, there's a solution there. It's recorded once and used many times, and that can help solve many, many problems. So video and audio are powerful, powerful tools going forward, I think.
I mean, going back to the kind of feedback and things like that, couldn't we get much better at supporting collaborative, peer-to-peer feedback as well? Because that gives it much more timeliness. It can be more or less in the second.
Definitely.
And you always learn by giving somebody else feedback. You learn something yourself. So it kind of both teaches and informs.
We're all on the same page.
Jonathan, last word to you, sir.
At the moment, I mean, we don't have anything that would do that two-way, but I mean, there's no reason why. Once you've got a stream, you've got a connection that you can go one way. I mean, at the moment, everyone's thinking of pushing it one direction because you're pushing it from the lecture room to the student because they can't make the lecture. But as you rightly say, everyone, I mean, getting that feedback back. Yeah, no, I think it's a very good thing. I mean, Duncan and I have discussed at length in terms of looking at how students achieve and how do you manipulate the data, because of course anything that someone's logging onto, and then we come at full foul possibly of the GDPR things, if they're logging onto anything to see something, you've got that data. You know how long they're logging on for, how long they stay in the session, how many times they stay in the session. That's the first instance, and that's quite a simple use of the data, but it can obviously then be used even further. You can obviously use it, as we talked about, in terms of mobility, in terms of, as Tom mentioned, about trying to push the student from a C to an A, and how do you achieve that? What's the best methodologies for doing that? And then those that are going the other way, how do we get that feedback from them? Because often these students are very they're unwilling to share the fact that and that's part of the problem, that often students at whatever level are very, they don't like to admit that they don't understand it. They don't like to admit that defeat, do they? I mean, they are quite happy to disappear in a lecture of 280 people, not really understanding it, rather than admitting, oh, well, he understands what's going on next to me and she understands the other side of it, but I haven't got a clue. I mean, often that's part of the problem. And if there's any way of, as Duncan mentioned about with Note Talker and things like that, those solutions that do show that the student is struggling a bit with understanding and grasping, how that can be used to best or to better.
I think some of it is also whether that video system is anonymous or identifying. And obviously for some things we're talking about being identifying, whereas if you're doing a whole class observation, there are systems out there like the sensing feeling that don't necessarily identify people individually. So that's a cultural as well as technology thing again as well. But no, the video is, as Tom said, the videos can be incredibly powerful, and we've all got HD camera in our pockets.
Exactly.
Well, thank you guys. That's the end of the discussion today. Thank you all so much for a really interesting chat. If you want to find out any more, each of the panelists have got a bio on the London Tech website, so go and click on that and reach out to those guys if you have any more questions. Thanks again for joining, and goodbye.
Okay, thanks. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye. Thanks.
Thanks all.
Guys, thank you.